All right, so what are my thoughts on tariffs, right? Well, it's quite simply this. Canada should not have done reciprocal tariffs to the US when they impose tariffs. Now, to understand why, we got to first explain tariffs. Now, tariffs can do one of two things. They can either bring domestic production back to the home country that's imposing the tariffs, or it can generate revenue from those tariffs, but only one at a time. It can't do both, right? Because either domestic production comes back home, people stop importing and buying more from that domestic supplier, or they continue to import and pay the tariffs, in which case revenue will be generated. But revenue won't be generated if domestic production increases and imports stop. So that is that. Now, import tariffs are imposed on the importer of record, meaning that in the country that it imposed those tariffs, generally the importer is going to be in that country, either a business in that country or a consumer in that country. So when the US buys a product from Canada, for example, it's likely that the US business who's importing the product or the US consumer that's importing the product is going to be the one paying that tariff. Now, Big Donnie T seems to think that he's subsidizing Canada, but that's not really true. The US is getting goods for that. It just happens to be that the US is in a trade deficit with Canada. And for them, it's actually not a bad thing because a big part of it is the automotive industry, where from Canada, they get raw materials, maybe parts, and then finish the automobile in the US and have a higher markup and are able to sell for a higher price and make more money at the end of the day, right? But now those goods all of a sudden became 25% more expensive. And that, at the end of the day, hurts the economy. We saw Jay Powell said the same thing yesterday in a speech, right? So why would we do the same thing for Canada when we're already a smaller economy? Why not just let the US shoot themselves in the foot, have lower profit margins on goods, and potentially higher costs overall? Inflation goes up, right? Now, 70% of Canadians agreed to do these reciprocal tariffs. But the thing is, it only hurts Canada, both in the short and long term. Now, there's definitely arguments against this, right? But the way I see it is this is Canada's chance to finally become a bigger economic superpower on a global stage. Because all of a sudden, not imposing reciprocal tariffs means that Canadians are able to produce goods or receive goods for less expensive and more competitive prices. And that, in turn, will make Canada a more competitive nation on a global stage.